What is up, meatheads and fellow YouTube patrons? I'm not sure if that's pronounced right. It may be Oi tube. Is it a silent Y? Anyway, this is my first go at this thing called YouTube. If you don't follow any of my stuff on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, feel free to check that out. If you've been following me for a while, I apologize because now you have to stare at me longer. But for you guys that don't know me, a couple things. My trademarks are low production value, so I'm generally in whatever room in my house does not have screaming children in it at that point in time. So sometimes you can just see various crap in the background, children's toys, my shit left out. My computer right now, my iPad right now, is stacked, being held up by a pile of supplements. Not joking. And there's generally a lot of mistakes and things that need edited. There's not any cool graphics, or big check marks or X's to let you know what's right or wrong. So if you've come for those things, oh yeah, I'm really ugly. I generally have a nasty beard, normally not kept up, hair done or shaved or whatever. So if you've come for those things, you've come to the wrong place. But on Instagram, there's plenty of really, really good looking people with a lot of high production value and graphics and cool songs playing behind their stuff. So I just want to get it out of the way. If that's what you're looking for, yeah, that's definitely not me. What I am hopefully attempting to provide is more than anything just a good thought process or improved thought process, which all should hopefully lead to you getting better results. At the end of the day, I truly believe it's not specifics that will get results, especially when speaking to a broad population, to a lot of people at the same time. For me to say this is the best exercise, this is the best rep range, this is the best anything, it's just bullshit. Generally, when people have something very specific that they say is the best, they tend to also be selling it. So again, it's I want to give you a lot of stuff, some concepts, some parameters. Application. Those are the things that I think are the most important for you getting results. And then again, I apologize. You're going to have to think a little bit. So if you don't like that, again, maybe follow somebody else. And as a result of that, sometimes when people are forced to think, sometimes, especially when you have to think something that challenges a current belief or something you're emotionally invested in, wrongfully emotionally invested in. Again, meaning if it's a dumbbell or a barbell, and you're emotionally invested in a piece of steel. That's a little weird. So if anything I say makes you emotional, do not confuse me for your girlfriend or your mom. I don't want to hear your emotions, so don't leave them below in the comment section. But if you want to call me ugly or dumb or whatever, I'm fine with all that. There's definitely some degree of truth to all of those things, or you think I'm wrong. If you have a good reason why, I honestly always want to find out things I don't know or find out where I'm wrong. I generally pay a lot of money to find out those things. So if you got it here, let me have it. If you can do it in a non-emotional, mature manner. So anyway, I wanted to start with what I think is a good video. Oh, and if anybody don't know kind of my background, my experience, everything is based on hopefully having trained in person, literally thousands of clients. I don't know how many different, no degree of bragging because I'm, anybody with a credit card and the ability to travel. I've done quite a few certifications, seminars, generally at least 2 every year for the past 7-8 years, degree in exercise science. And like I said, I've been training for about 13 years now, literally training clients in person. And I've worked with pros from various sports, but predominantly, bodybuilding, figure, bikini, all the big physique competitors, level sports, and of course, my favorite thing is to get together with other coaches, other people smarter, better than me at a lot of stuff, and pick their brain, find out their thought process, their application, their concepts. I rarely go to somebody and say, hey, what's the best rep range? That's just not the thing that people that actually produce results talk about. So anyway, you can always look up those, some of the letters and numbers and shit behind my name, which to an extent doesn't matter, but also does matter because I take my profession serious. So I put my time and money into getting better to provide you guys better information. So I'm not Of course, I'm basing this off of clients, based off what actually produces results, based off of some degree of research, actual science or concepts that science lays for us, and to a degree, the results I produce myself. But it's not just from one of those sources, which I think would kind of discredit a little bit where my information is coming from. You definitely need to have some of all of it. So the first thing I want to cover really is I talk often about what makes a great exercise for hypertrophy. So again, that's what I talk about is hypertrophy, growing muscle. While there's obviously some degree of crossover, I'm not the strength guy. I'm not necessarily the performance guy. So if you want somebody else, go to that. I'm talking hypertrophy. What's the best, fastest, most efficient way to put on muscle? And I talk often about what makes a great exercise. And I think it's great to have exercises or build exercises around concepts as opposed to just following the dogma of this exercise is the best. Because then it should be followed by for who? I mean, can you honestly say that exercise, even like this most glaring, obvious example of someone that's 5 foot tall and 100 pounds, and another person or another guy or giant female that's 6'8" and 400 pounds, that every exercise is going to fit them the same, that it's going to have the same effect. They have all different, obviously, besides lengths of joints and range of motion and things that they can do. I think you can apply concepts to everybody. You can't apply specifics. So the three big categories that I think pretty much, I'm sure there's some degree of little things here or there, but is going to cover 99% of what makes a great exercise for hypertrophy. I'll call it accuracy. I used to call that alignment. I think accuracy is a little bit more specific to what I'm talking about, which I'll go into detail on all of these. The next one is bracing, and probably the most complicated, but maybe just as much important as the other three, is profiles. Specifically, if we're talking exercise, that exercise's resistance profile. So all of these could deserve, and maybe will, half an hour videos individually in the future. But the quick breakdown is, alignment or accuracy, I think, is just how well is whatever load you're holding in the hand, if you're using a cable, a free weight, a machine, whatever. I mean, the basic understanding or basic goal of hypertrophy is that the load that has, or that it produces, the force it produces from gravity, is you're trying to direct it towards a muscle that you're trying to produce a certain environment, that will lead to the result of hopefully after you train it, it can grow and get bigger. So you're trying to direct whatever loads in your hand to a specific muscle. So your ability to do that, I would call is accuracy. So just a good example, or a simple example, and there's hundreds that you could go through every single exercise, but I think a good one is if you're trying to do a dumbbell chest press. So you could do a chest press with your elbows tucked right in at your side, very close to your body. It's technically a dumbbell press. But if you look at where your upper arm points, basically, in this case, or aligns, it aligns really well with the fibers of your front delt. So you could say, okay, well, this might be a pretty darn good front delt exercise, but from an accuracy standpoint, if we're trying to train these pec fibers, you could make the very, very strong argument that, okay, well, getting that upper arm and the path it's traveling in line with those pec fibers is going to provide a little bit more accuracy, with where we're trying to get that load to go. So that's one example. And you could argue, too, then, how your joints and stuff in between. So there's a lot of things that go in this category. How well does that load, direct where you want to go? An example I use a lot, especially for some, bigger guys, is let's say you have a lot of guys, they figure out later in their career, straight barbell curls might be a good exercise at some point in time, and whether it's either was never a good exercise for them or as they put on more tissue, sometimes they tend to lose range of motion. So if you look at my hand, I can't quite supinate that, I don't know if you can quite see that, to 180 degrees. So if you imagine this line, I need to get this, so basically be in line with the bottom of your screen. So I'm maybe 10 degrees short, 15 degrees short, maybe even, of 180 degrees. So to do a straight bar curl with both hands on it, I have to first be able to get my wrists to 180 degrees. If I force it on that bar, some of that load is either going to be eaten at my wrists, at my elbows, at my shoulders, and not going where it should, at least without wrecking some joints along the way, through and to your biceps. So all those things would lump in accuracy. How accurate is the exercise you're trying to do as far as directing the load where you want it? So, if you want something to be accurate, if you're trying to grow your chest, well, this isn't the most accurate exercise. Out here might be better. The next one is bracing. So bracing, the best way it's explained to me is how well you can push into something unmoving in direct opposition of the load you're using to train the muscle. So again, chest, I'll give you two examples, and this one tends to be a good example. Imagine, how do you think you would be stronger? What could you use more weight? If you're doing a standing cable press, or if you're doing a flat bench press or dumbbell press. When you press, when you're on a bench, assuming the bench is sturdy, and you press, it doesn't matter how heavy the weight is. Like your chest, your upper back is pushing into that bench, which is pushing in direct opposition. So however much weight you have between your body and the weights in your hand, that's how hard the bench is pushing into your upper back. And no amount of load, it doesn't matter how much you have in your hands, again, regardless, as long as the bench doesn't break, no matter how hard you push this way, there's no weak point as far as like having to stabilize or brace. It's braced. It's 100% locked in stone. Whereas if you did a cable, if anyone's ever done relatively heavy, chest presses on a cable, at some point in time, just your ability to get your body weight forward and stabilize and balance this thing as you press, as you get strong enough, if your chest is at a point where you can press, 200-pound dumbbells and you weigh 250 pounds, if you're trying to pull off 200-pound cables, it's literally impossible. They're going to pull you up with them. You won't be actually able to get them off. So that's an example of bracing. The reason that you can produce more force from your pecs always on a bench press, where you actually have a bench against your upper back, as opposed to a cable press, is because of bracing. It's not that cable presses are a bad exercise. Put a bench against your back when you're doing a cable press, and everything kind of changes. Another example is a leg press. So imagine if you didn't have the back pad on the leg press. It's like, how much could you leg press? Well, you could leg press how much you could just basically hold yourself in the seat and kind of do an active hip flexion and crunch at the same time. Literally, if you got enough weight, it would just push you right out of the back onto the floor. Once you got out what your grips and your abs and your hip flexors could hold in place. It'd be the worst exercise on earth. It wouldn't make any sense. Well, your body's in the exact same position. You could actually get there. You could hold yourself there. You could technically perform the exercise holding yourself in there, maybe with the sled. But the point of a leg press is that's great is if you put 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds, however much people can actually do, you can push your hips, the top of your hips, your lower back into that back pad, as long as literally obviously the machine doesn't fall apart. That's never going to be the weak point. It's always just how much force can your legs produce, and that's how much you're going to be able to do. There's not going to be any other limiting points. So again, those are two obvious examples, but it gets a little less obvious when you look at things, especially lots of times for arm training and back training, where there's a lot of things that have to stabilize or produce force other than the muscle you're trying to train, which you could make the argument, if the muscle you're trying to train can't produce as much force as possible, or you're putting all this effort into something else having to work, or that other thing is the limiting factor, then you're maybe not putting maximum tension and maximum force output from the muscle you're trying to train. And the last one, and arguably the most complicated, so I'll try and give the most simple example I can think, but this literally gets very complicated, is resistance profiles. So I think one of the best examples is a squat. So let's just say you're doing a barbell back squat. Everybody knows in the gym, you'll see a guy that can put 5 plates on there and do quarter squats. But if you went to the bottom, to the full range of motion, whatever he's capable of, not talking about active range or any of that shit, he might not be able to do a plate each side. So he literally has strength to do quarter squats with 5 plates, but when he goes to the bottom, he's not capable of doing that. So the reason is, well, what happens? I mean, it's the same weight. What difference does it make if it's at the top or the bottom? Well, when we're talking about, there's the weight on your back. That's part of what the muscles around your joints have to handle. The second part of it is something called moment arm, which basically means as you squat, and if you just drew a line, that bar path is going to stay right through right through midfoot. That's producing a line of force. So that bar is producing a line of force. You just imagine that straight up and down. How far your joints are away from that line of force, that distance, that horizontal distance, is called a moment arm. And so it's something people kind of inherently know, but that's the reason for it, because it's literally an equation. So the weight on your back times that moment arm is how much torque it's producing at a joint, which equates to how hard do the muscles that move and manage that joint have to work. So basically, as you squat down, let's just talk about the hips to not complicate the knees, but as you squat down, right at the very top, maybe your hips only move 6 inches away from that line of force. So it's, whatever amount of torque that is at the hips, and you can manage that. Your glutes can produce that much torque and actually move you up and down. Well, as you go further and further down, your hips go further and further away from that line of force. And so as a result, as soon as they get 6 inches away, 12 inches away, 18 inches away, the amount of torque at that joint is literally going, double, triple, all the way up to, that's how much tension and how much torque your glutes have to produce. They have to work 3 times as hard when they're 18 inches away as they do when they're 6 inches away. So basically all that means is the perfect exercise for squats, for hypertrophy, would match what your body can do the whole way. So if you can only squat, a plate at the bottom, but you're capable of squatting 5 plates at the top, in theory, the perfect exercise would be, okay, well, I've got a plate's worth of weight at the bottom, and I've got 5 plates worth of weight at the top. So how would I do that? Well, the way that you can do that is with accommodating resistance. Technically, those numbers are obviously just made up and arbitrary, but you could do it with chains, or you could do it with bands. Where you're at the bottom, maybe there's 0 weight from those chains or bands, so you just have, the weight from the bar. And as you come up higher and higher and higher and higher, and more chains, come off the ground, or those bands get tighter and tighter and tighter, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So this has nothing to do with whether, squats without accommodating resistance are a good or bad exercise. You could just make the strong argument for hypertrophy. Having an exercise that matches what those muscles are capable of doing through the entire range of motion is going to be a more efficient, better exercise that has a better profile. So those are the parameters that you can really use to build any exercise. You can go through alignment first. That has a lot to do with, your form, your execution, but also just the structure of people's bodies, the range of motions they can actually do and control. Then you can look into bracing. It's like, well, how hard can just the muscle I want to work, and not other muscles or other stuff have to stabilize or be potentially the limiting factor? And then the simplicity part of the simplistic view of the more complicated thing with profiles is how hard are my muscles being challenged through the range of motion that I'm doing the exercise, and ideally having it at least close to. So the reason I give you all this, and this is something I'll get into more and hopefully explain with more exercises and make a little bit clearer, but those are the concepts. And the concepts are, you always want at least the best exercises that you can have. If I always say this is kind of arbitrary, but ideally you'd want something that matches 3 out of 3. You have something that's got great alignment, it's got great bracing, and it's got a great profile. And the reality is, in the gym sometimes you just have to do the best with what you can do. And I always say, alignment's the one you really shouldn't sacrifice, because that's the one that's going to keep you injury-free and at least training the muscles that you want to train. The other two, very often you just have to do the best that you can do, because you're not going to get injured. It might be instead of doing 1 exercise, well, now you have to do 2 or something like that. But as a bare minimum, 99% of the time, if you're really thinking, you can get an exercise to match 2 out of those 3 pretty well, and have the third okay. And the reality is, there's no perfect exercise, especially because alignment's so complicated. Bracing's pretty easy to do, but profiles, there's so many things that go into that, and your profile really changes what your body can do, changes really from rep to rep every exercise. So you'll never actually have the perfect exercise. So the information is not to be discouraging. The information is just hopefully for you to constantly looking for and building better exercises. And this is why, every single, from a anecdotal standpoint, is every single great bodybuilder, every single person with a great physique of all time. When you're 18, you can do whatever the hell you want. But by the time everyone's 40, they have their list. If they're either broken and they can't do anything. You've seen those 40-something-year-olds in the gym that have knee braces, back braces, they got their weight belt, they got their elbow braces, wrist braces, and everything's broken, in which case they never really figured out what fit their body. Or you'll have some people that say, well, squats just never fit me, but hacks were great, or leg press was, or back squats didn't fit me, but front squats did. Or I can't do straight bar curls anymore, or I can't do skull crushers anymore. And whether it maybe fit them at some point in time or doesn't fit them now, everybody's come to this realization that everything doesn't fit everybody, and everything can always be improved and everything can always be better. So that's the purpose of all of this. Is I honestly think, and again, if there's something I'm leaving out, feel free to leave some comments below, but I honestly think every great exercise can be built from those 3 main categories. And the purpose of this should help too is, we can really think about those 3 things. Hopefully it gets you unemotionally attached to exercise. And I said I use myself as the example first and foremost. I probably injured myself, so I probably started bench pressing when I was 15, and by the time I was 25, I probably injured myself bench pressing probably at least 6-7 times. Pretty significant shoulder injuries, and little wrist issues and elbow issues. And I was just so emotionally attached to the idea that you had to bench press. I wasn't even a powerlifter. I wasn't competing. I was just letting my testosterone make me think I had to bench press. So now I realized the way I was doing it wasn't the best. I can actually manipulate my body position, manipulate my control. Nothing to do with range of motion. I can still touch my chest fine, and I can make it a pretty good exercise. But the reality is, the subtle things is, if I just turned it into, a 10-degree decline or a 15-degree incline, all of a sudden it turned into a good chest exercise for me. And if you really think about it, someone's rib cage size can just easily vary. Your sternum can be here, or it could be 10 degrees up, 15 degrees up. And literally, your rib cage is changing the same thing that a bench can change. And as everyone's rib cage is just arbitrary, all of a sudden, a flat bench, if you really think about it, is arbitrary as well too. So all this stems from, hopefully one, people pay for my services now. I want to provide them the best exercises, the best information. But for myself as well too, it's when you're emotionally attached to things that problems happen. And again, I've had that happen myself, and I've seen it happen with trainers and with their clients, where something hurts, something doesn't fit, it doesn't feel good, it's not producing the desired result. And people have forced it upon people or forced it upon themselves for emotional reasons, and you'll always cause problems. It doesn't matter. Again, the 18-year-old thing I used to say is I could do certain exercises pretty darn good and be like, oh, well, it doesn't hurt now. And I literally had some exercises that didn't hurt for 10 years, but it'll catch up if it doesn't fit. So again, hopefully that kind of stuff helps, guys. Leave your comments, leave your questions below. Help provide me some more direction for where you guys want me going with my YouTube stuff. And again, I apologize for being ugly and for the lack of production value and all the little places in there that I messed up, and I don't feel like going back and editing. But if you're watching, leave some feedback, any shape or form, as long as it's not emotional, and I'll be happy to hear it and kind of use it from there. So have a good one, guys. Hopefully that helped.